Today we're excited to present in the form of an economic renewal plan for the NT all that we have been considering from communities, peak organisations, the science, the evidence to develop all our policies in this election campaign. A rapid transition to renewable energy and improving the quality of life for Territorians must be central to any sound economic recovery plan. And the transition is without doubt possible, with immense returns outlined in our plan. There are no issues with making the grid stable. With technological developments in battery storage and the move to green hydrogen, there is no doubt that NT could be a world leader in the production and export of renewable energy. And these possibilities and plans have been around for a long time. The Australian Greens have long had a vision and a plan for a transition to 100% renewable energy Australia-wide, which we have had in our past election campaigns. In 2019, the Environment Centre and Beyond Zero Emissions released a 10 gigawatt vision, proving that we can go much further than our domestic needs and actually produce 1,000% more renewable energy to drive modern manufacturing and export cleaner energy. Beyond Zero Emissions this year released a 1 million jobs plan for Australia to recover our economy with renewable energy being central. The NT government have their 50% renewable plan, roadmap to renewables, but unfortunately haven't sufficiently implemented any of the recommendations from that. Unfortunately, political will has been diverted to the fossil fuel industry. The NT Reconstruction Commission is stacked with oil and gas executives, a classic case of disaster capitalism. The oil and gas industry has come in swooping, paying off political parties to sell their obsolete and polluting resources, claiming we can't make it without fracking. We need to clean up politics. Fracking is a rort and is a distraction from the real possibilities. This is not an economic plan. It is economic suicide driven by multinational corporations that will cost us all. We need to embrace new technologies and invest in modern community infrastructure and support for local Indigenous businesses. Development must be ecologically sustainable. I'm proud to be green and proud to be able to say we do not accept corporate donations, and proud to deliver a plan that is not aimed at corporations, but prosperity for all Territorians. A jobs and economic renewal plan from the bottom up, not the top down. Our plan is holistic. It requires investment in racial, social and environmental justice because it is a long-term investment. If we have healthy communities and an environment that is healthy, there will be massive economic returns. Tim will now talk a little bit more about the energy transition and the jobs plan for that. And Peter will have it focus on our Indigenous agricultural plan. Thank you.
Hi everybody. Thanks Billy. I also want to acknowledge the Larrakia people and the traditional owners of this land, past, present and future custodians. And I'm very proud to also be standing here as a Greens candidate for Port Darwin to speak on the energy reform that we're talking about as part of the Greens economic renewal vision. Our plan is to essentially reimagine the way that the grid works here right now. We know that it is both inefficient, uneconomical, and is environmentally not actually up to grade to what we need for a 21st century grid. And so in order to transform the electricity market so it's lower cost for all Territorians, the Greens believe we need a utilities reform so that Jacana, Power and Water and Territory Generation are all working together in unison to be able to build the smart grid for the future. Solar energy has transformed the world as a technology that is allowing people to cut their emissions while at the same time lower their power costs. And that is the incredible moment that we live in. And if the Northern Territory can shift over towards that in the next 10 years, which the Greens have laid out an ambitious plan for 100% renewable energy transition, we believe that will transform the economy here, make it easier for businesses to work here, and add value to our manufacturing industries and our ability to process raw minerals that is such a central part of our economy. We have also put forward an idea for an NT Futures Fund, which would be funded via the saved subsidies to power and water, which is up to $90 million a year at the moment. So over the next 10 years, there's almost $1 billion in subsidies just to maintain the power prices as they are, even though that's actually still very expensive for people. So our idea is that instead of maintaining the system as business as usual and trying to continue on this way, this paradigm, what we would do is assist people through low interest green loans to be able to transform their own businesses, houses, and potentially factories through an equity system payback scheme in which would eventually actually make the entire investment cost neutral. And that means that every single person in the Northern Territory can benefit from that while the government can underwrite this transition. We also need to be able to think about the different ways in which energy is going to allow us to transform our manufacturing industries so that remote communities can also be able to benefit from this, which people in Aboriginal communities around the Northern Territory are actually right now living in the highest electricity prices in the entire the country. And if we can assist them to also become self-sustainable, that will take a huge pressure off both the public purse and also allow those communities to be more sustainable. So this is part of a holistic vision that we see transforming both our energy market, but also lifting our economy in a massive, incredible way. It's a very exciting time for us to be alive. And the crises that we are facing, both environmental, climate crisis, but also the economic crisis that we are living through, thanks to the coronavirus, give us an opportunity to rethink the way that we are actually running this economic system. And that is why we are calling this a renewal vision, rather than just reconstructing it the way that it already was. There is too many subsidies to maintain the system as it is, both to the construction industry, to the trades, and to all kinds of businesses, where what we could be doing is renovating and retrofitting our economy, our buildings, our grid. And that is the way that the Greens believe we could transform our economy, future-proof it, and lead to greater prosperity for the Northern Territory. Our plan goes into more detail, and you can look at it online. And I encourage you to do so and check it out much more in detail. We would love to be able to discuss this in the broader public arena over the next week, because these are the issues that Northern Territorians really need to get their head around when they're facing the next 10 years of this massive economic crisis that we are in. And if we are going to be able to turn around our $8 billion and counting debt, we need to be able to have fiscal responsibility that is also balanced with environmental awareness and a sustainable development platform. So thank you very much. I'm going to pass over to Peter Robertson, who's the candidate for Fanny Bay, who's going to speak about remote community development and Indigenous horticulture ideas. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Tim. Growing up on a farm, I guess I'm quite passionate about food and where it comes from and how it's produced. I'm a big supporter of organic farming. Having lived in the Territory for a few years, it's obvious that the overwhelming focus in the Territory always seems to be on cotton, sugarcane, other large-scale, broad-acre crops which rely on massive fertiliser use, massive pesticide use and massive water use. And that seems to be almost the sole objective of our governments and our department. They're always trying to work out how they can clear more land and grow more of these monoculture broadacre crops, which have such a huge environmental impact and at the end of the day produce so little of real benefit to the community, especially if we want to eat nice, clean, green, healthy food. But in the background, as always, here is this amazing emerging industry, the Indigenous horticulture and bush foods wild harvest industry. And there are now literally dozens of organisations, mostly Aboriginal organisations, working in this area, trying with almost zero support from government and departments to develop a whole new industry based around growing native foods, harvesting from the wild. You will have all heard, of course, of the Kakadu plum industry, which is gradually getting off the ground. The green plums, many different species. There are literally hundreds of species in the Northern Territory of native foods, let alone about 160 species that are known culturally as medicines. So there's this huge opportunity for unique, sustainable agriculture, horticulture and wild harvesting through Indigenous communities. It needs support from the government. At the moment, it's always put in the shade by these other mega projects, and it's time for that industry, the Indigenous horticulture and bush foods industry, to step out and receive the support that it deserves, and hopefully the Greens can play their part in promoting this industry and providing the support that it deserves. And also very centrally important to this emerging industry is the whole issue of retaining cultural knowledge and intellectual property rights. There is a lot of focus amongst Indigenous organisations about the attempts by white organisations to come in and take over Kakadu plum and green plum and these other iconic native food species, and it's incredibly important that Indigenous communities retain control over those species and are able to develop them in the way that is culturally appropriate for them. So thank you very much, and I'm going to hand you over to Aya, who's going to talk about youth and economy and jobs. Thank you.
Hi everybody, my name is Aya. I'm the candidate for Johnston in the upcoming Territory election. I'd like to acknowledge that we're gathering on Larrakia land and pay my respects to elders past and present and to elders emerging. I think when we talk about ideas like the economy and jobs, we really need to think long term. And that's something that for a long time hasn't been happening. In the Territory, we're really stuck into this boom and bust cycle that is creating, short economic booms followed by a large crash. So when we're thinking about things like this, it's important to think long term and be sustainable. And as a young person, my main concerns are that we have a economy and a jobs market that caters to the current needs and keeps up with the times of the work that we're living in and the work that we're engaging in. So I think it's time for governments particularly to really think long term, to make sure that those jobs, those pathways and opportunities are there, and that those pathways will translate into real jobs for young people. The other thing that we do need to think about, of course, is that we're not going to have an economy if we don't have a safe environment to live in. So transitioning to a renewable energy system is so important, and I think we really need to focus on the fact that it needs to be a just transition, but it also needs to be a rapid transition because we are running out of time.
So thank you all again. We have focused on a few aspects of our plan today, but we encourage you all to explore it more, and it will be available on our website along with all of our policies. The principles of our plan is what will make it work. From the bottom up, sustainable outcomes and improving quality of life. The NT Reconstruction Commission has limited representation. It is stacked with gas executives and bankers. And there's limited representation from First Nations people, the renewable industry, arts workers, tourism. We cannot continue with fracking. Fracking is a major cause of climate change and is not sustainable. It uses and pollutes millions of litres of water. If we do not act on climate change, it will cost us all. The University of Melbourne just released predicted cumulative economic damage of Australia failing to keep temperatures below 2 degrees to be 2.7 trillion. The emissions from fracking the Beetaloo Basin will blow our Paris targets. and we saw the immense damage the climate change-induced bushfires did over spring and summer. The world is heating up. This is a disaster for people living in poverty, and again, it will target our most vulnerable people living in Aboriginal communities. People cannot pay their energy bills. Everyone needs air conditioning, and air conditioning that can run on cheaper and cleaner renewable energy. We've had many organisations and alliances urge other candidates and parties this election to introduce a climate act to ensure that we keep our emissions down. Whilst other parties accept corporate donations, we will not see the political will to phase out fossil fuels. Our priorities, if we get into government, is a rapid transition to renewable energy, racial justice, child protection, a climate change act, and an end to political donations. And again, thank you to all the peak organisations that have been working hard through this election campaign to drive a better deal for people and our economy. Thank you.